Hey, everybody. So I know it's been quite some time and I feel very delinquent and not getting around to it. But I'm just back to finishing up the read aloud for Wrinkle in Time. And I didn't realize that I was actually at the last chapter. So the last time I should have just plowed ahead and continued to the end, but I didn't. So this is going to be a short one. But I know it's been so long since we read last. So I just want to sort of go over where we were. um, Essentially, Meg had, and her father had escaped from Camazotz, and her father had done the test ring, but she hadn't come through it very well. And so she was sort of frozen and in recovery on this alien planet with this ant beast character. And so finally she kind of came back out of it. Now remember, Charles Wallace was still stuck on Camazotz, and he was sort of being possessed by IT. And so they decided that Meg has to go back by herself to try to get Charles Wallace. And so she's like sufficiently recovered. And so they're about to go back and they're going to take her back to Camazotz. So, okay, so I'm going to read just the last paragraph from chapter 11, and then we'll start chapter 12, which is the last chapter. Don't try to use words, Aunt Beast said soothingly. You're just fighting yourself and me. Think about what they are. This look doesn't help us at all. And Meg tried again, but she could not get a visual concept out of her mind. She tried to think of Ms. Whatsit explaining tessering, and she tried to think of them in terms of mathematics, and every once in a while, she thought she felt a flicker of understanding from Aunt Beast or one of the others, but most of the time, all that emanated from them was gentle puzzlement. Angels, Calvin shouted suddenly from the table. Guardian angels. There was a moment of silence, and he shouted again, his face tense with concentration. Messengers. Messengers from God. I thought for a moment, Aunt Bee started, and then subsided, sighing. No, it's not clear enough. How strange it is that they can't tell us what they themselves seem to know, a tall, thin beast murmured. And one of Aunt Beast's tentacled arms went around Meg's waist again. They are very young. And on their path, as they call it, they never communicate with other planets. They revolve around all alone in space. Oh, the thin beast said, aren't they lonely? And suddenly a thundering voice reverberated throughout the great hall. We are here. So this is Chapter 12, The Foolish and the Weak. Meg could see nothing, but she felt her heart pounding with hope. With one accord, all these beasts rose to their feet and turned towards one of the arched openings and bowed their heads and tentacles in greeting. Ms. Whatsit appeared, standing between two columns, and beside her came Mrs. Who, and behind them a quivering of light. And the three of them were somehow not quite the same as they had been when Meg had first seen them. Their outlines seemed blurred. Colors ran together as in a wet watercolor painting. But they were there. They were recognizable. They were themselves. And Meg pulled herself away from Aunt Beast and jumped to the floor and rushed at Mrs. Whatsit. But Mrs. Whatsit held up a warning hand, and Meg realized that she was not completely materialized and that she was light and not substance, and embracing her now would have been like trying to hug a sunbeam. We had to hurry, so there wasn't quite time. You wanted us? Ms. Whatsit said. And the tallest of the beasts bowed again and took a step away from the table and towards Ms. Whatsit. It is a question of the little boy. Father left him, Meg cried. He left him on Camazotz. Appallingly, Ms. Whatsit's voice was cold. And what do you expect us to do? Meg pressed her knuckles against her teeth so that her braces cut her skin, and then she flung out her arms pleadingly. But Charles Wallace, IT has him. Mrs. Whatsit, save him, please save him. You know, we can do nothing on Camazotz, Ms. Whatsit said, her voice still cold. You mean you'll let Charles Wallace be caught by IT forever? Meg's voice rose shrilly. Did I say that? But we can't do anything. You know we can't. We tried. Ms. Whatsit, you have to save him. Meg, this is not our way, Miss Whatsit said sadly. I thought you would know that this is not our way. And Mr. Murray took a step forward and bowed, and to Meg's amazement, the three ladies bowed back to him. I don't believe we've been introduced, Miss Whatsit said. It's father. You know, it's father. Meg's angry impatience grew. Father, Miss Whatsit, Miss Who, and Miss Which. Well, I'm very glad to, Mr. Murray mumbled, and then went on. I'm sorry, my glasses are broken and I can't see you very well. It's not necessary to see us, Miss Whatsit said. If you could teach me enough more about the tesseract so that I could get back to Camazotz. What then? Came Miss Witch's surprising voice. I will try to take my child away from IT. And you know that you will not succeed. Well, there's nothing left except to try. Mrs. Whatsit spoke gently. I'm sorry, we cannot allow you to go. Well, then let me, Calvin suggested. I almost got him away before. And Mrs. Whatsit shook her head. No, Calvin, Charles has gone even deeper into IT, and you will not be permitted to throw yourself in with him. For that, you must realize, is what would happen. And there was a long silence, and all the soft rays filtering into the great hall seemed to concentrate on Miss Whatsit and Miss Who and the faint light that must be Miss Witch, and no one spoke. And one of the beasts moved a tendril slowly back and forth across the stone tabletop. And at last Meg could stand it no longer, and she cried out despairingly, Then what are you going to do? Are you just going to throw Charles away? And Miss Witch's voice rolled formidably across the hall. Silent, child. But Meg could not be silent, and she pressed closely against Aunt Beast. But Aunt Beast did not put the protecting tentacles around her. I can't go, Meg cried. I can't. You know I can't. Did anybody ask you to? The grim voice made Meg's skin prickle into goose flesh, and she burst into tears. And she started beating at Aunt Beast like a small child having a tantrum, and her tears rained down her face and spattered Aunt Beast's fur. And Aunt Beast stood quietly against the assault. All right, I'll go, Meg sobbed. I know you want me to go. We want nothing from you that you do without grace, Ms. Whatsit said, or that you do without understanding. And Meg's tears stopped abruptly as it had started. But I do understand. And she felt tired and unexpectedly peaceful. And now the coldness that under Aunt Beast's ministrations had left her body, it had also left her mind. And she looked toward her father, and her confused anger was gone, and she felt only love and pride. And she smiled at him, asking forgiveness, and then pressed up against Aunt Beast. And this time Aunt Beast's arm went around her. Mrs. Witch's voice was grave. What do you understand? That has to be me. That can't be anyone else. I don't understand Charles, but he understands me, and I'm the one who's closest to him. Father's been away so long, since Charles Wallace was a baby, and they don't know each other. And Calvin's only known Charles for such a short time, and if it had been longer, then he would have been the one. But I see, I understand. It has to be me. There isn't anyone else. And Mr. Murray, who had been sitting, his elbows on his knees and his chin on his fists, rose. I will not allow it. Why? Ms. Witch demanded. Look, I don't know what or who you are, and at this point, I don't care. I will not allow my daughter to go alone into this danger. Why? Well, you know what the outcome will probably be, and she's weak now. She's weaker than she was before. She was almost killed by that black thing, and I fail to understand how you can even consider such a thing. Calvin jumped down. Maybe IT's right about you, or maybe you're in league with IT. I'm the one to go if anybody goes. Why do you bring me along at all? To take care of Meg? You said so yourself. But you have done that, Ms. Whatsit assured him. I haven't done anything, Calvin shouted. You can't send Meg. I won't allow it. I'll put my foot down. I won't permit it. Don't you see that you're making something that is already hard for Meg even harder? Ms. Whatsit asked him. And Aunt Beast turned tentacles towards Ms. Whatsit. Is she strong enough to test her again? You know what she has been through. If Witch can take her, she can manage, Ms. Whatsit said. Well, if it will help, I could go too and hold her. Aunt Beast's arm around Meg tightened. Oh, Aunt Beast, Meg started, but Ms. Whatsit cut it off. No, no. I was afraid not, Aunt Beast said humbly. I just wanted you to know that I would. Mrs. Whatsit? Mr. Murray frowned and pushed his hair back from his face, and then he shoved with his middle finger at his nose as though he were trying to get the spectacles closer to his eyes. Are you remembering that she is only a child? And she's backward, Calvin bellowed. I resent that, Meg said hotly, hoping that indignation would control her trembling. I'm better than you at math, and you know it. Well, do you have the courage to go alone? Ms. Whatsit asked her. Meg's voice was flat. No, but it doesn't matter. And she turned to her father and Calvin. You know, it's the only thing to do. You know, they'd never send me alone if. Well, how do we know they're not in league with IT? Mr. Murray demanded. Father. No, Meg, Mrs. Whatsit said. I do not blame your father for being angry and suspicious and frightened. And I cannot pretend that we are doing anything but sending you into the gravest kind of danger. I have to acknowledge this quite openly, that it may be fatal danger. I know this. But I do not believe it, and the happy medium doesn't believe it either. Can't she see what's going to happen? Calvin asked. Oh, not in this kind of thing, Ms. Whatsit sounded surprised at his question. I mean, if we knew ahead of time what was going to happen, we'd be like the people on Camazotz with no lives of our own, with everything all planned and done for us. I mean, how can I explain it to you? Oh, I know. In your language, you have a form of poetry called the sonnet. Yes, Calvin said impatiently. What's that got to do with the happy medium? Kindly pay me the courtesy of listening to me. Ms. Whatsit her voice was stern, and for a moment Calvin stopped pawing the ground like a nervous colt. It is a very strict form of poetry, is it not? Yes. There are 14 lines, I believe, all in iambic pentameter, and that's a very strict rhythm or meter, yes? Yes, Calvin nodded. And each line has to end with a rigid rhyme pattern, and if the poet does not do it exactly this way, it is not a sonnet, is it? No. But within this strict form, the poet has complete freedom to say whatever he wants, doesn't he? Yes, Calvin nodded again. So, Ms. Whatsit said. So what? Don't be stupid, boy, Ms. Whatsit scolded. You know perfectly well what I'm driving at. You mean you're comparing our lives to a sonnet, a strict form, but freedom within it? Yes, Ms. Whatsit said. You're given the form, but you have to write the sonnet yourself. What you say is completely up to you. Please, Meg said, please. If I've got to go, I want to go and get it over with. Each minute you put it off makes it harder. She's right, boomed Mrs. Witch's voice. It is time. You may say goodbye. Ms. Whatsit was giving her not permission, but a command. And Meg curtsied clumsily to the beast. Thank you all very much. I know you've saved my life. And she did not add what she could not help but thinking, saved it for what? So IT could get me. And she put her arms around Aunt Beast and pressed up against the soft, fragrant fur. Thank you, she whispered. I love you. And I you, little one. Aunt Beast pressed gentle tendrils against Meg's face. Cal, Meg said, holding out her hand. And Calvin came to her and took her hand and then drew her roughly to him and kissed her. And he didn't say anything, and he turned away before he had a chance to see the surprised happiness and the brightening in Meg's eyes. And at last she turned to her father. I'm sorry, Father. And he took both her hands in his and bent down to her with his shortened eyes. Sorry for what, Megatron? And tears almost came to her eyes at the gentle use of her old nickname. I wanted you to do it all for me. I wanted everything to be all easy and simple. And so I tried to pretend that it was all your fault because I was scared and I didn't want to have to do anything myself. But I wanted to do it for you, Mr. Murray said. That's what every parent wants. And he looked into her dark, frightened eyes. I won't let you go, Meg. I am going. No. Ms. Whatsit's voice was sterner than Meg had ever heard it. You're going to allow Meg the privilege of accepting this danger. You're a wise man, Mr. Murray. You are going to let her go. And Mr. Murray sighed, and he drew Meg close to him. Little Megaparsec, don't be afraid to be afraid. We will try to have courage for you. That is all we can do, your mother. Mother was always shoving me out into the world, Meg said, and she'd want me to do this. You know she would. Tell her. And she started and choked, and then held up her head and said, no, never mind. I'll tell her myself. Good girl. Of course you will. And now Meg walked slowly around the great table to where Ms. Whatsit was still poised between the columns. Are you going with me? No, only Ms. Witch. The black thing. Fear made her voice tremble, and when Father tested me through, it almost got me. Well, your father is singularly inexperienced, Ms. Whatsit said, though a fine man and worth teaching, and at the moment he still treats testering as though he were working with a machine. We will not let the black thing get you, I don't think. Well, that's not exactly comforting. But the momentary vision and faith that had come to Meg dwindled. But I suppose I can't get Charles away from IT. Stop, Ms. Whatsit held up her hand. We gave you the gifts the last time we took you to Camazotz, and we will not let you go empty-handed this time. But what we can give you now is nothing you can touch with your hands. I give you my love, Meg. Never forget that. My love always. And Mrs. Hu, eyes shining behind spectacles, beamed at Meg. And Meg handed back the spectacles she had used on Camazotz. Your father's right. Mrs. Hu took the spectacles and hid them somewhere in the folds of her robes. The virtue is gone from them, and what I have to give you this time, you must try to understand not word by word, but in a flash, as you understand the Tesseract. So listen, Meg, listen well. The foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For you see your calling, brethren, how not many wise men after the flesh, and not many mighty, and not many noble are called. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty, and base things of the world, and things which are despised, hath God chosen, yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are. And she paused, and then she said, may the right prevail. And her spectacles seemed to flicker, and behind her and through her, one of the columns became visible. And there was a final gleam from the glasses, and she was gone. And Meg looked nervously to where Ms. Whatsit had been standing before Ms. Hu spoke, but Ms. Whatsit was no longer there. No, Mr. Murray cried and stepped out towards Meg, and Ms. Witch's voice came through her shimmer. I cannot hold your hand, child. And immediately Meg was swept into the darkness, into nothingness, and then into the icy devouring of the black thing, which Mrs. Witch wouldn't let it get me, she thought over and over and over, while the cold of the black thing seemed to crush at her bones. And then they were through it, and then she was standing breathlessly on her feet in the same hill on which they first landed on Camazotz. And she was cold and a little numb, but no worse than she had been in the winter in the country when she had spent an afternoon skating on the pond. And she looked around, and she was completely alone, and her heart began to pound. And then, seeming to echo from all around her, came Mrs. Witch's unforgettable voice. I have not given you my gift. You have something that IT has not. This something is your only weapon, but you must find it for yourself. And then the voice ceased, and Meg knew that she was alone. And she walked slowly down the hill, her heart thumping painfully against her ribs. And there below her was the same row of identical houses they had seen before. And beyond these, the linear buildings of the city. And she walked along the quiet street, and it was dark, and the street was deserted. And no children were playing ball or skipping rope, and no mother figures at the door, and no father figures returning from work. In the same window of each house was a light as Meg walked down the street, and all the lights were extinguished simultaneously. Was it because of her presence, or was it simply that it was time for lights out? And she felt numb, beyond rage or disappointment or even fear, and she put one foot ahead of the other with precise regularity, not allowing her pace to lag. And she was not thinking, she was not planning, she was simply walking, but steadily towards the city and the domed building where IT lay. It's a dome. And now she approached the outlying buildings of the city, and in each of them was a vertical line of light. But it was a dim and eerie light, not the warm light of stairways and cities at home. And there was no isolated, brightly lit windows where someone was working late or an office was being cleaned, or out of each building came one man, perhaps a watchman, and each man started walking the width of the building. They appeared not to see her. At any rate, they paid no attention to her whatsoever, and she went on past them. What have I got that IT hasn't got, she thought. And suddenly, what have I possibly got? And now she was walking by the tallest of the business buildings, more dim vertical lines of light, and the walls glowed slightly to give a faint illumination to the streets. Central intelligence was ahead of her. Was the man with red eyes still sitting there, or was he allowed to go to bed? But this was not where she must go, though the man with red eyes seemed the kind old gentleman he claimed to be when compared with IT. But he was no longer of any consequence in the search for Charles Wallace. She must go directly to IT. IT isn't used to being resisted, Father said. That's how he managed, and how Calvin and I managed as long as we did. Father saved me then, and that there's nobody here to save me now. I have to do it myself. I have to resist IT by myself. Is that what I have that IT hasn't got? No, I'm sure IT can resist. IT just isn't used to having other people resist. Central intelligence blocked with its huge rectangle at the end of the square, and she turned to walk around it, and almost imperceptibly her steps slowed. It was not far to the great dome which housed IT. I'm going to Charles Wallace, and that's what's important. That's what I have to think of. I wish I could feel numb again the way I did at first. Suppose IT has him somewhere else. Suppose he isn't there. I have to go there first anyhow, and that's the only way I can find out. Her steps got slower and slower as she passed the great bronze doors and the huge slabs of Central Intelligence Building, as she finally saw ahead of her the strange light, the pulsing dome of IT. And Father said it was all right for me to be afraid. He said to go ahead and be afraid. And Mrs. Hu had said, I don't understand what she said, but I think it was meant to make me not hate being only me and me being the way I am. And Miss Whatsit said to remember that she loves me. And that's what I have to think about, not about being afraid or not as smart as IT. And Ms. Whatsit loves me. And that's quite something to be loved by someone like Ms. Whatsit. She was there. And no matter how slowly her feet had taken her at the end, they had taken her there. Directly ahead of her was the circular building, its walls glowing with violet flame, its silvery roof pulsing with a light that seemed to Meg to be insane. And again, she could feel the light, neither warm nor cold, but reaching out to touch her, pulling her toward IT. And there was a sudden sucking, and she was within. It was as though the wind had been knocked out of her, and she gasped for breath in her own rhythm, not the permeating pulse of IT. And she could feel the inexorable beat within her body, controlling her heart and her lungs. But not herself, not Meg. It did not quite have her, and she blinked her eyes rapidly against the rhythm until the redness before them cleared and she could see. And there was the brain. There was IT, lying, pulsing, and quivering on the dais, soft and exposed and nauseating. And Charles Wallace was crouched beside IT, his eyes still slowly twirling, his jaw still slack, as she had seen him before, with a tick in his forehead, reiterating the revolting rhythm of IT. And as she saw him, it was again as though she'd been punched in the stomach, for she had to realize afresh that she was seeing Charles, and yet it was not Charles at all. I mean, where was Charles Wallace, or her own beloved Charles Wallace? I mean, what is it I have got that IT hasn't got? You have nothing that IT hasn't got, Charles Wallace said coldly. How nice to have you back, dear sister. We have been waiting for you. We knew that Mrs. Whatsit would send you. She is our friend, you know. And for an appalling moment, Meg believed. And in that moment, she felt her brain being gathered up into IT. No, she screamed at the top of her lungs. No, you lie. And for a moment, she was free from IT's clutches again. And as long as I can stay angry enough, IT can't get me. Is that what I have that IT doesn't have? Nonsense. Charles Wallace said, You have nothing IT doesn't have. You're lying, she replied, and she felt only anger towards this boy who was not Charles Wallace at all. No, it was not anger. It was loathing. It was hatred, sheer and unadulterated. And as she became lost in hatred, she also began to be lost in IT. The red miasma swam before her eyes. Her stomach churned in IT's rhythm. Her body trembled with the strength of her hatred and the strength of IT. And with the last vestige of consciousness, she jerked her mind and body. Hate was nothing that IT didn't have. IT knew all about hate. You are lying about that, and you were lying about Ms. Whatsit, she screamed. Ms. Whatsit hates you, Charles Wallace said. And that was where IT made IT's fatal mistake. For, as Meg said automatically, Ms. Whatsit loves me. That's what she told me, that she loves me. And suddenly she knew. She knew. Love. That was what she had that IT did not have. She had Miss Whatsit's love, and her father's and her mother's, and the real Charles Wallace's love, and the twins and Aunt Beast's. And she had her love for them. But how could she use it? I mean, what was she meant to do? I mean, if she could give love to IT, maybe it would shrivel up and die. For she was sure that IT could not withstand love, but she, in all her weakness and foolishness and baseness and nothingness, was incapable of loving IT. And perhaps it was not too much to ask of her, but she could not do it. But she could love Charles Wallace. She could stand there and she could love Charles Wallace. Her own Charles Wallace, the real Charles Wallace, the child for whom she had come back to Camazotz, to IT, the baby who was so much more than she was and yet was so utterly vulnerable. She could love Charles Wallace. Charles, I love you. My baby brother who always takes care of me, come back to me, Charles Wallace. Come away from IT. Come back. Come home. I love you, Charles. Oh, Charles Wallace, I love you. And tears were streaming down her cheeks, but she was unaware of them. And now she was even able to look at him, at this animated thing that was not her own Charles Wallace at all. And she was able to look and love. I love you. Charles Wallace, you are my darling and my dear and the light of my life and the treasure of my heart. I love you. I love you. I love you. And slowly his mouth closed, and slowly his eyes stopped their twirling, and the tick in his forehead ceased its revolting twitch, and slowly he advanced toward her. "I love you," she cried. "I love you, Charles. I love you." And then suddenly he was running, pelting. I mean, he was in her arms and he was shrieking with sobs. "Meg, Meg, Meg. I love you, Charles," she cried again, her sobs almost as loud as his, her tears mingling with his. "I love you. I love you." In a whirl of darkness, an icy cold blast, an angry, resentful howl that seemed to tear through her darkness again. And through the darkness, to save her, came a sense of Ms. Whatsit's presence, so that she knew it could not be IT, who now had her in its clutches. And then the feel of the earth beneath her, of something in her arms, and she was rolling over on the sweet-smelling autumnal earth. And Charles Wallace was crying out, "Meg, oh Meg." And now she was hugging him close to her, and his little arms were clasped tightly around her neck. "Meg, you saved me," he said over and over. "Meg," came a call, and there were her father and Calvin hurrying through the darkness towards them. And still holding Charles, she struggled to stand up and look around. "Father, Cal, where are we?" Charles Wallace, holding her hand tightly, was looking around too, and suddenly he laughed. His own sweet, contagious laugh. "We're in the twins' vegetable garden, and we landed in the broccoli." And Meg began to laugh too. And at the same time that she was trying to hug her father, to hug Calvin, and not let go of Charles Wallace for 1 second. "Meg, you did it!" Calvin shouted. "You saved Charles." "I'm very proud of you, my daughter." Mr. Murray kissed her gravely and then turned towards the house. "And now I must go in to Mother." And Meg could tell that he was trying to control his anxiety and eagerness. "Look!" She pointed to the house, and there were the twins and Mrs. Murray walking towards them through the long, wet grass. "First thing tomorrow, I must get some new glasses," Mr. Murray said, squinting in the moonlight and then starting to run toward his wife. Dennis's voice came crossly over the lawn. "Hey, Meg, it's bedtime." And Sandy suddenly yelled, "Father." And Mr. Murray was running across the lawn, and Mrs. Murray was running towards him, and they were both in each other's arms. And then there was a tremendous happy jumble of arms and legs and hugging, and the older Murrays and Meg and Charles Wallace and the twins and Calvin grinning by them until Meg reached out and pulled him in, and Mrs. Murray gave him a special hug of all of his own. And they were talking and laughing all at once. And when they were startled by a crash, and Fortinbras, who could bear being left out of the happiness not 1 second longer, catapulted his sleek black body right through the screen door to the kitchen, and he dashed across the lawn to join in the joy and almost knocked them all over with the exuberance of his greeting. And Meg knew all at once that Ms. Whatsit, Ms. Who, and Ms. Witch must be near, because all through her she felt a flooding of joy and of love that was even greater and deeper than the joy and love which were already there. And she stopped and laughed, stopped laughing and listened, and Charles listened too. Hush. And then there was a whirring, and Ms. Whatsit, Ms. Who, and Ms. Witch were standing in front of them, and the joy and love were so tangible that Meg felt that if she only knew where to reach, she could touch it with her bare hands. Mrs. Whatsit said breathlessly, "Oh, my darlings, I'm sorry we don't have time to say goodbye to you properly. You see, we have to..." But they never learned what it was that Ms. Whatsit, Ms. Who, and Ms. Witch had to do, for there was a gust of wind, and they were gone. And so that's the end of A Wrinkle in Time. And I'm sorry it took so long for me to get the last chapter done, but I just think it's really important to hold on to the idea that love wins, and that we have reserves that we don't know about, but we have them in us. So anyway, good night, everybody.